there's this kind of like, you got to create reels, you got to keep, feeding the beast. And if you don't feed the beast today, it's going to like reject you and you're not going to get found. And that can feel like a lot of pressure, especially if you're trying to live this lifestyle where you're not always online and you're going to be off grid, but you still want your business to hum along while you're, living life.
Welcome to the RV Entrepreneur Podcast, the weekly show for nomads, work campers, RVers, and entrepreneurs looking to earn a living or build a business while enjoying the RV lifestyle. This week's host is Kimberly Crossland. Let's settle in and enjoy the RV Entrepreneur Podcast, brought to you by RV Life.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the RV Entrepreneur Podcast. I am your co-host for this week, Kimberly Crossland, and I'm really excited to be bringing you my friend and fellow content creator, Sandy Sidhu. She is an accomplished ad specialist dedicated to problem solving, analyzing results, and making suggestions based on the client's expectations and their results. She also loves all things technology. You're going to hear us geeking out a little bit about AI and why we have a very big love-hate relationship with it. She especially loves geeking out over Facebook ads, though, and marketing strategies. And that's really what we're going to be diving into on this episode. She left the corporate world to pursue her own digital marketing business over 10 years ago, and she has not looked back since. So she is a wealth of knowledge, and I'm thrilled to have her on. But before we get to that interview, let me ask you this. Are you still struggling with a weak campground Wi-Fi? King Wi-Fi antennas are the solution to boost your internet experience. These powerful antennas pick up and amplify Wi-Fi signals from up to a mile away, ensuring that you stay connected wherever you park. With the easy setup, secure VPN networks, and support for multiple devices, you'll enjoy fast, reliable internet on the go. Say goodbye to slow connections and hello to seamless browsing and streaming. Choose between King Wi-Fi Max Pro, King Swift, and King Falcon models, and see why King has been the connectivity leader for over 2 decades. For more information, visit kingconnect.com and be sure to use the code RVE2024 at checkout to save 15%. That is exclusive to our podcast listeners, so you're definitely going to want to use that code. All right, let's get on to the interview. Welcome to the RV Entrepreneur Podcast, Sandy. I'm super excited to chat with you. You and I have been connected for years, I think. And so now for us to sit on Zoom and have a conversation that we can share with other people is going to be really, really exciting. So before I jump in, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Thanks so much for having me, Kimberly. And you're right. I think we connected in a business and babies group, and like our kids aren't babies anymore. So it's been a while. So yeah, a little bit about me. I am an ad strategist. I help business owners primarily use Facebook and Instagram ads to kind of cut through the noise and get seen by their ideal audience and grow their bottom line that way.
Yes. And I wanted to have you on the show because, as you know, with the RV lifestyle, you're traveling a lot. Sometimes you're off grid. Sometimes you don't expect to be off grid. And all of a sudden you're like, I hope things are working. I hope I'm still getting found. I hope that my business is still seen. And I love what you just said about cutting through the noise, because and right before we hit record, we started chatting about this and we're like, we better hit record before we go too far into this. But we're told to just like constantly create. And it's just exhausting. And so where you come and you fill in the gap is you can help cut through the noise without the entrepreneur feeling like they're constantly on this cycle of, I got to make more content. I got to produce more reels. If I didn't post my reel today, the algorithm's going to hate me. And it's just such a vicious cycle that we do to ourselves. So I think I know you've got a lot to offer in this realm. So let's talk a little bit about that. When you talk about cutting through the noise and you talk about creating content that will get found, what does that look like from your perspective? Do you use a lot of AI, or do you use a lot of, which is like the buzzy thing right now, or do you take a different approach?
So you're right. We did get into this right before we hit record, and I'm glad we're able to kind of jump right back into that and kind of touch upon, AI and the content creation. And it's overwhelming, right? So most business owners and entrepreneurs didn't go into business to become content production houses, right? Like, we have clients to serve. Social media was one tool to kind of get out there and get visible. And, as we're seeing, as you mentioned, there's this kind of like, you got to create reels, you got to keep, feeding the beast. And if you don't feed the beast today, it's gonna like reject you and you're not gonna get found. And that can feel like a lot of pressure, especially if you're trying to live this lifestyle where you're not always online and you're going to be off grid and there might not be like a hotspot where you're ending up, but you still want your business to hum along while you're living life. So that's where something like paid ads can help, and work with what you've already created. And that's something that I like to emphasize is we're all kind of creating this content, and then before we even market it, we're already like ready to create the next piece. And just the way the algorithm's working these days, you'll see that not a lot of your content is getting seen by beyond kind of like that handful of same people that you reach daily. So what I, suggest to like people I work with and is to take some of that best performing content and put a little bit of budget behind it so that you are actually getting out there and reaching new people, as well as reaching people who did raise their hand and say, hey, I want to follow you and I want to see your content. So you can get in front of them, get in front of people who visit your website, get in front of, your email list, and all this without spending a lot of money per day and without having to create tons of content every single day. So it's like leveraging what you've already created and making it work harder for you while you're doing other things. And the thing is, a lot of people, when I've had this conversation with them, it's like a light bulb moment, because many people are like paying VAs to create this content and social media strategists. And again, there's nothing wrong with that per se, but I get pushback often and like, oh, but ads are expensive. And I was like, well, paying someone else to create content that's not getting seen is also expensive, and your time is not free. So it's like you can choose, to spend time, or you can leverage, some ad spend to really just kind of have that humming along. So I like to bring that kind of example up of like, you're creating reels constantly. Why not put like $2 a day behind it, and just break out of being seen by the same people and really reach those new audiences, or even existing audiences, because as you know, people need multiple touch points before they may take action.
Yeah. And I think that you just touched on several different types of ads. So you talked about, getting found by new people, but then also retargeting, where, some people need to see you multiple times, which is totally normal and okay. We are not, there's a ton of noise, especially when you're on social media. You're in a very different mindset. You're not there specifically looking for a very specific answer. You're there to, at the end of the day, kind of tune out some noise and tune into other noise, but you just want to like mindlessly scroll. You want to be entertained. You find a helpful tip and you're like, well, that's good. I'll save that for later. But you're not like in this hyper purchase mode all the time. And so being able to have those ads that will pop up and just say, hey, I'm still here. Hey, remember you liked this. Hey, remember that I have something new to share with you. And I know the algorithm's not going to show you. And I've been seeing, especially on Instagram and on Facebook, those reels, they have plummeted in visibility, and it's everybody across the board. It's the huge accounts and it's the small accounts and it's everybody in between. It's just such a battle that we're constantly like crawling and clawing to get to the top. And man, is that exhausting. So what you offer is the ability to take all these different ads and to help people to stay visible so they can actually, like you said, just do life, live life, go sit around the campfire and put your phone inside the rig and you don't have to worry about it. So what types of ads specifically work well if you're going off grid? And a quick follow-up to that before I forget to ask it is, do you like to set up different ads without having that kind of maintenance behind them? Because I want to give an example of why I'm asking this. I was traveling a couple of years ago. We went to Big Lake, Arizona, which is gorgeous. Highly recommend it. Sitting outside listening to the Elks Bugle, and I typically will go and check my phone sometimes because that's what you do. And I did not have any cell phone service. And I never read that in the reports that there was not going to be cell phone service there, but there was no cell phone service at this particular spot. And I was not going to go hike away from my family a mile just to get cell service, just to check in. So, yeah, exactly. Like holding such a traditional cell phone commercial, right? And so I am wondering what types of ads would I have wanted to have running that would give me that peace of mind, like, oh, don't have to worry about it if I can't be online checking my ads and making sure everything is good. What would I want to have to stay visible?
So, I mean, in that case, I would run like a visibility ad. Like, so take one of your existing reels, with the kind of objective of engagement. So, or just like kind of views. Like, so it's not like people might be commenting and you're not there to respond, but just kind of building up those views and just kind of getting out there. And then from the budget point of view, or sorry, the campaign schedule, if you know you're going to be like 7 days spotty connection. So put a start and an end date and you limit it to like, let's say it's going to be a $2 a day visibility ad. So then it's going to start, let's say Sunday and end the following Sunday. There's no risk of like overspending. Like you've set aside like $14 for that campaign and it's going to just kind of hum along and it's just going to just build up your presence. Like people are just going to kind of see you. The other one that I could suggest as well is if you just had like a retargeting ad. So you just kind of want to show up again in front of people who, like you said, have already visited your website or engaged with other content. So again, it's something that's kind of low maintenance, low ad spend that's required. I'll add a caveat though, like if you're doing something that's going to require, let's say they're buying and there's purchases and maybe there's a risk of like some customer support. So maybe you just want to stick to like visibility and like possibly a second one I could suggest is lead generation. So let's say you have a lead magnet and you're like, hey, you know what? Even though I'm going off grid, I am planning a launch for a couple of weeks from now. I still want to grow my database. So a lead gen ad is like pretty kind of low key in the sense that you're giving, like they see the ad, they put in their information, it goes into your email provider, and then you have a sequence that kicks in. So it's, again, something that doesn't necessarily involve customer service. I'd be hesitant unless you have like a backup team member who's going to like respond to customer service and sales, because chances are that could come up while you're offline. So I would hold off doing that unless you have someone who's going to handle anything related to customer support. So I would stick to like something like visibility, just so you're still showing up, people still get to see you while you're off grid and, you're using existing content that you already created.
Yeah, I really like that. And it makes it so much simpler to think about. And especially if you just kind of so tell me if I'm wrong, because I'm not as well versed in Facebook ads. This is why I want to talk to you. Tell me if I'm wrong, but can you have multiple ads running at one time? I assume so.
Yes, absolutely. So you can have within a campaign. So basically the structure is you have the campaign. So that's the top level container. Then you have the ad set, which is like who you're targeting, the demographics, behaviors, and whatnot. And then you have the ads. So one ad set can have, multiple ads. I don't see, anyone at this, like probably needing more than like, 3 to 5 at that level. If they're just, we're talking going off grid, right? We're not talking a whole full blown campaign. So maybe even 2 to 3. And then a campaign can also have multiple ad sets. So you might decide, you want to have one ad set in that campaign targeting cold audience, and then another ad set targeting people who've already visited your website or are on your email address, like to stay top of mind, for example. So yes, you can definitely have more than one.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about like if you're on your way to the campsite, or if you're going to hit the road and you can just kind of click a button, turn it on, and you know that it's going to be running for you after you've tested it a little bit.
Do you struggle with inadequate cooling in your RV during those sweltering summer months? The issue might be simpler than you think. Did you know that your RV air conditioners are not directly connected to any air ducts in most cases? This common setup drastically reduces their efficiency. Cool RV has engineered a brilliant solution to bridge this gap. Priced at only $84.95 each with free shipping. Dive into the details at coolrv.com. That's cool with a K, RV.com. Podcast listeners can save 5% with code RVLife.
Or my next question for you is about the spending. I mean, you're talking about $2 a day. I spend more on my pumpkin spice latte this
Exactly.
week. So I think that you can really, you don't have to throw tons of money at ads for them to be working. What is the minimum that you would recommend spending? Not necessarily if you're just going off grid, but just in general. Like, do you have kind of a bell curve of how much people should be spending? Do you put more money towards it during certain seasons of your business? What do you recommend in
Yeah,
terms
so
of
it really
spend?
ebbs and flows. Like I said, like if you know that you have, like, for example, I have a client, as we're, people are going to be listening to this. It's like the end of the, we're leading up to like sort of like the busy promotional time of year with like Black Friday and the, Christmas holidays and all that. So we ramp up my clients' budgets based on, okay, more people are going to be we want to, like, more people are looking for what we're trying to sell at this time. So, and we have to be a little bit more competitive because there's more people advertising. So then ad spend will go up. But then if it's just kind of like, let's say in between launches and it's just kind of like audience building, I will scale back the budget. Like, for example, I have a client that I'm working with right now. She just wanted to kind of test the waters with some list building. We just have, I think we're just running $10 a day ads. We were just kind of testing out the audience, seeing how her open rates were for her lead magnet. And we've already generated in 25 days about 600 emails. So we're getting emails under, like, I think we spent $250. So under 50 cents an email. And, she now is like, okay, this is based on a month's data and looking at how people are because in her case, it's not just enough to get the email. We want to see people are opening the sequence, where they're clicking, if they're going to the website. So we see our open rates and click-throughs are good. So she's like, okay, I want to we're looking at the data now. Let's scale this up and then kind of also adjust the audience parameters a bit. So that's just like a, $10. Like you said, we spend more. No joke. I spent like $8 on a latte the other day. So that was like a bit shocking. It's like, it did nothing for my business. So like $7.53 to be exact. I was floored. But so for a couple of dollars more, you're growing your business, while you're out living life and not having to kind of get exhausted posting. And so the client who we just did the email campaign for, she has a really big Instagram account. Like, I think she has 35,000 followers. However, I was like shocked, but her email list does not line up. So all those people have not made it across to her email list. So she still does get engagement on Instagram, but you can see that it doesn't do as much for her business, because ultimately she needs to get them on her email list and get them on her, like, get them visiting her website, because she generates ad and affiliate money. So that's also something, you could keep trying to post, in her case, post all these reels, post all this catchy content that gets tons of engagement if you look at her ManyChat. But ultimately her business goals is to grow her email list, and it wasn't happening organically. So that's another thing to be aware of. Like, we see all these large accounts, we see like, oh wow, they must have such a big email list. And it's like, no, it's not translating at all. So, but what made her list start growing is like really just, putting these $10 ads out.
Yeah, I was not actually jumping around, because you and the poor listener would have to hear me like slamming around in my chair. But I want to be jumping around because I love what you're saying, and it's so important about having those numbers stay consistent. If you can have a $35,000 followers on Instagram, and they're not translating into people who are in your inbox, where you can reach them with those affiliate links, with your offers, more targeted, that's really a huge opportunity that you're missing out on. And so having these ads to be that stepping stone so that you can create the content and have fun with it, repurpose it, put some ad spend behind it, create very targeted ads specifically at the right demographic of people, and get that list growth is huge. And that's where you're going to make your money. That's where the money starts to really flow in, even when you are off grid, even when you are, even if you're not running those I shouldn't even say even when you are off grid. There was a time I was riding my bike around a campground, different one than Big Lake, Arizona. This was in Verde Valley, Arizona. But I'm riding my bike around the campground and I felt a buzz and I looked down at my watch and I got in a sale and I was like, I love that. Like, this is what it's about. Like, just the simplicity and the ease. And you can show up for the right people at the right time. That's what the ad does for them. And then they can buy when it's right for them, because now you've gotten them to go from a passive follower to a more engaged follower to then being engaged on your email list. And it's this entire beautiful funnel that you have going. And I love what you're saying as well. I don't want to jump too far ahead. So let me hold off on that for right now, because I want to ask, before I get to the post purchase and the analytics about what you were just talking about, like looking at, okay, are these qualified leads? Are we getting the right people? Are they engaging with the ad? Before you're looking at that data, you have to actually launch your campaign. So what do you need to have in place to launch that campaign? What do you need to have in place so that you can do the retargeting, so that you can set everything up to be the most effective it can be?
Great question. So at a minimum, to start, you need an ad account. You need your credit card handy because you're going to have to fill that in. And then ideally, if you want to do retargeting, you would have the pixel on your website. So you start build, which is a small piece of code Facebook gives you. You put it on your website. They take care of the rest after. So basically, it's going to start building up that audience of people who have visited your website and visited certain pages. I like to give an example. It's you will be able to do the same thing. Like, for example, you go on the Gap, you look at a pair of pants, next thing you know, those jeans are following you around everywhere till you basically buy them. So you get to do that as well once you pixel your site. So you could retarget them on Instagram, you can retarget them on Facebook. So those are the pieces that you'd ideally want to have in place. Now, if you're listening to this and going, oh, I'm stuck. I don't have the pixel yet, but I really want to run ads. For the visibility ads that I'm talking about, like if you just want to promote a reel, promote like your existing content, you can do that without having because we're going to be building up like the views of that content. So you can kind of do that first without having to deal with the pixel and maybe split out the effort. So yeah, basically that's what you'll need. You'll need your ad account, put all your information, get that set up, ideally put the pixel on your website, and then have that content. And one thing I would add, if you do want to promote like existing things that you've created on Instagram, you can't use copyright music. So that's where it gets a little, the trending audio, a lot of times if it's copyright, then it won't be accessible at the ad level to choose. So just maybe keep that in mind when you're creating content, like to mix it up, maybe have some of your original audio or just like no audio, so that you're not like limited by what you're able to reuse. That being said, you could create a completely new one and upload it into Ads Manager. But for simplicity's sake, I'm trying to look at, because I know people have a lot of content, and to reuse and push out the things that you've already put effort into.
Yeah, that's so important. I didn't realize, now that you say it, I'm like, well, of course that makes sense, but I don't know that I would have thought about it if you had not said that. So thank you. What other types of content, like if I'm looking at let's just say I'm looking at my Instagram feed and I'm like, I really want to grow. Which one of these reels should I turn into an ad and put a couple bucks behind? How are you discerning that? Is there like a specific way that we can figure out which one is going to be the best?
I mean, generally, so if you're going to a cold audience, something, even the talking head types work, just, it doesn't have to be overly produced or overly like complicated. So I think that's kind of something to think about when you're creating content. Um, a lot of the ones that just have, it's like the B-roll content. I don't know if your audience is as familiar with that. So it doesn't have like the point of view kind of stuff that seems to be working well, trending. So the more organic looking content is the trend that I'm seeing now. Like the less overly produced. Like images still do well. Like I generally tell people to kind of test between the both. Like don't put all your eggs in one basket and say like that's it, this reel has to work and that's it, that's all we're gonna do. But generally the trend of what I'm seeing with my clients and, what I'm seeing also in my newsfeed is content that has an organic feel to it. So things where it's like B-roll, where you're just like, you might even just be at your computer. Let's say you don't, you're not a personal trainer who has a lot of videos that they're creating, but you just might be at your desk and have, someone even record it from that angle, and then you just can layer text over it. So I would just recommend you kind of have to experiment and see what your audience, and that's where the organic does help. So it's like you can kind of see what people are connecting with, and what sometimes it'll surprise you what ends up getting more traction. So then that would be a good indication of, okay, well, if people are responding to it, let me try to see if I can reach a wider audience this way.
Yeah, I love that. And then to follow on with that, once you choose a handful that you think, okay, I'm going to test like these 3 reels or these 3 posts or whatever, whichever content you're testing, what metrics, how long do you want them to run? And then what metrics are you looking for to see, yes, that one's successful, I want to put more money towards it, or that one doesn't quite work, I'm just going to not be putting money towards that at all anymore?
Right. So generally, I mean, if we're just talking sort of like lead gen ads, um, without getting a little bit too technical in the like explanations. So, or maybe I can even provide a little like worksheet along with this so that it's something people can look at. But in your ads manager, there's going to be columns that you data that you can look at. And one of them, let's say you're doing lead generation where you're signing up for emails, it's going to start showing you, okay, you've got like 10 emails that people have signed up for, or like, then you're going to want to look at like, it's called the link click-through rate. So basically Facebook will give you the data that will tell you, okay, this one people are responding to. So that CTR link is generally, you want it to be above 1%. So that's just kind of like a rough metric to kind of give you an idea. Okay, anything lower, you might have to go and change the text or change the image. But ideally, if you're generating leads, depending on your audience, you kind of have to say, okay, well, do I want to spend $10 for an email? Is it going to translate into something down the line in terms of coaching? That I would be hesitant to start off spending $10 for an email. Like I would want to stay in like the $2 to $5, that range, because again, unless you know for sure you're selling on the back end, you don't want to be like spending a ton of money right off the bat. So you have to kind of test and see. And then how long you want to run it. So you want to get like, so there's also impressions. So impressions is like Facebook's way of telling you kind of how many times this has shown up in a news feed. So if you've only run it for a day and you're only running a handful of dollars, it's probably, and depending on the audience that you've selected, it's too soon to make a judgment call. Like a lot of times people will be like, nothing's working. I don't think anyone's looking at my video. You want to let it go for like 24, like at least 48 hours before you kind of go in there and see what's happening. But in like the off grid sense, you're not going to be going and like kind of fussing around with it. So I would kind of just let it, you have to be okay with what happens in those 7 days, but you're also capping your budget, right? So when you do kind of reemerge, and let's say you look at you're going to look at, let's say the video views. If that's one of the ones, you're going to see Facebook will break it down. Okay, how many people have viewed 25%, 50%, 75%, and then 100%. So ideally, your whole audience isn't going to go and watch all of it necessarily. But the good thing is that you can then take that video, those views, and say, okay, you know what? I want to now go and target people who've watched like 50% of the video, because like, okay, they've been interested in 50%, and then maybe there's another chunk of people who've gone and watched more. So these are all things you can kind of do after the campaign is ended. But I wouldn't want to touch it during, because I'm assuming that you're not going to be looking at it.
Yeah. Well, and I also think it's just good to have that mindset of I'm going to take my hands off it. It's almost good to like go camping for the weekend and just get away.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
you're only spending a couple bucks, you've got the end date on it, so you're not going to overspend on it, and let it run so you're not, obsessively looking at it. I do things like that. I look at my phone, I'm like, how's it doing? Who saw it? what's going on? Why aren't people like, we get in our heads about it. So
Yeah.
being able to, this is the benefit of being an RV entrepreneur, is you get to just go and say, you know what? I'm going to step away. I'm going to let it do its thing. I know I'm only spending $14, $8, $6 for the weekend, whatever it is. But I'm going to at least get away for a couple days, not have to think about it. We'll worry about this on Monday. I'm not going to overspend. I'll spend less than I would for Sandy's latte that she had that was $7.53.
Well, and that's the thing, right? The goal ideally of this type of campaign is, yes, eventually, you're going to use the audiences that you're building up, then to like retarget and get in front of them. But it's to just continue having a presence while you're not going to have, if you post on Instagram, you post, like if you happen to create a story or a reel, but it's like takes the pressure off you because that people are still going to see you're still there. Like you're like, and again, like I mentioned before, you could even just specifically have content that goes out in front of your existing followers. Like that's the next phase that I'm doing with that client with the 35,000, because they've all raised their hand and they wanted to follow her, but they're not necessarily all in her email address. We're now going to kind of create ads more specifically to that audience. So people who've engaged with the content and everything. So all the possibilities like that.
Yes. All right. I could talk to you about this for forever, but we have a time limit. So I would love for you to, let's close things out with you just sharing where people can find you and how they can maybe even book a call with you just to see if you can help them with their ads, their visibility, and setting things up so they can go off grid with a little extra confidence.
Awesome. So if you're on Instagram, you can follow me at Ads with Sandy. And then if you are interested in, seeing how we could put a plan like this together for you so you can go off grid, live life, and not worry about algorithms while you're out in nature, it's sandysidhumedia.com/book call.
Perfect. And I'm going to have both of those links in the show notes so they're easy for everyone to click on. Thank you so much for coming on the show. This was great to chat with you in a more public forum because I know we've had plenty of conversations behind the scenes. So I'm glad that you were able to come and share all your knowledge. Thanks for being on.
Thanks so much for having me.
That was such a great interview with Sandy. I love talking to her about Facebook ads because it's not my forte, but she is just such a pro at it. I especially loved what she said in the very beginning of the interview when she said, we're not meant to be content production houses, and it's time for us to stop feeding the beast and instead be a little bit more strategic about how we're showing up and growing our audiences. She was able to talk through the different types of ads for going off grid and how not to overspend when you're off grid. I love the visibility ads. I especially love how she talked about growing your email list with Facebook ads because being able to bridge that gap between your follower count and your subscriber numbers is just so important to your sales as an entrepreneur, especially an RV entrepreneur. And then, of course, at the end, she talked to us about how you're going to set up your foundation, the type of content that you should be promoting, and the different metrics that you can monitor. So be sure to go and visit her website, follow her over on Instagram, and go and say hi and that you heard her here on the RV Entrepreneur Show. We'd also love to hear what you thought about this episode, so go and leave a comment inside of our Facebook group and let us know if you have any follow-up questions. I know Sandy's going to be hanging out over there, and she would love to answer them for you. So feel free to go head over to the RV Entrepreneur Facebook group, say hello, ask those questions, and just come to connect with other RV entrepreneurs. It was great to be with you this week, and I cannot wait to be with you again next month.
Ever wished you could learn more about RVing from the experts? With RV Life Masterclass, you can. Gain access to a wealth of knowledge through online courses and a resource library filled with insightful guides. Whether you're a novice RVer or a seasoned traveler, there's always something new to learn. Start expanding your RV knowledge today by visiting RVLife.com.